Hi, it's Mayor Stahl. Welcome to another edition of Total East Brunswick. I'm pleased to be joined today with Scott Sipprelle, who, if you remember, was running as a congressional candidate. And I've had the opportunity to talk with Scott many times over the past months, and he is one of the most interesting individuals that you'll ever meet, so I invited him to talk to us here in East Brunswick. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Or do I call you Mayor, or is this media mogul Dave, or how should I term this?
I love just my name, David.
Dave, okay. I'll go with Dave.
Let's first talk about the campaign, because we're obviously, in the campaign season already in terms of the presidential. I mean, that's all that's, even though it's a year away, politics is already out there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience running for Congress?
Well, it's funny. I spent a year looking for the media spotlight, and then I went out of the media spotlight. So this is kind of strange to be back in the studio again.
It's much more low-key.
Much more low-key. No pressure. I can't screw this one up too bad. But happy to be back in East Brunswick, because this was the one town that I visited the most during my campaign. I think it was 23 times I was in East Brunswick.
Sure, I remember the debates you had with Rush Holt at
We had the
Young
debates
Israel.
And the synagogue visits and the door-to-door and the canvassing on the street, and we determined that if I could win East Brunswick, I could win the district. And this is only one of 44 towns that I had to campaign in, but we had so identified that this was the model on which the whole competition rested that we were back here a lot. So it's great to be home again.
Did you think that from that rationale, did you think it was because East Brunswick, because we're independent thinkers in terms of how we vote?
Independent thinkers, very mixed demographic. The history of supporting both Republicans and Democrats. Frankly, the way America should work is the way East Brunswick works. And so I thought that if I could bring my campaign here, my message of reform and renewal, I would have a good shot of winning. We ended up winning East Brunswick by, I think, 100 votes. Of course, I didn't win the election because some of the other numbers didn't turn as I wanted to. But I tell you, Dave, it was a great experience. I didn't go into it thinking I wanted to be a politician. I still don't want to be a politician.
I'm with you on that. I still view myself as an elected official. I'm not a politician.
Absolutely. I've heard Governor Christie say some people run for office because they want to be something, and some people run for office because they want to do something. Right. I have a great life, frankly. I've been very blessed and very lucky, and I'm happy to keep doing that. My life didn't end when my political campaign ended. Sure, I would have liked to have won. You asked about the scope and the shape of politics today. I think it's broken. I think it's badly broken.
In what way?
Very partisan, very closed-minded, very controlled, very monopolistic. You come in through a red door or a blue door, and you have to make a lot of compromises to get through that gate, and they control both gates into the arena. And so by the time most candidates get to that arena, they're already compromised. They've lost their courage. They've lost their independence. They're already campaigning for their next election. I don't think, I've spent my life in business, and I evaluate companies and business models and business plans, and I decide whether or not to invest in them. Sometimes things are so broken that they can't be fixed, or you need to take a dramatic step of change. And in America today, I think our politics are so badly broken that the changes should not be incremental. They should be revolutionary. I talked about things like term limits. Maybe we should issue certificates or licenses for politicians to practice. You're a businessman. You own a business. You see how hard it is to generate revenues and to cover your costs, and you bring that common sense thinking to the way you administer your town. Right. If we had more of that in politics today, with a short lifespan, so that you were going there to do something and then get out and tag someone else and let them come in and do it, I think we'd have a much better solution than we do today. I
agree, even with respect to New Jersey mayors. When I was elected mayor, one of the things that I actually wanted to do was to create term limits. Under state laws, municipalities don't even have that ability because there's no state enabling legislation for that.
Right.
Because I do believe that there is a polarization on both parties. For the most part, almost at all levels of government, where we are now stopping doing the people's work.
Absolutely. And frankly, I think that America itself is very healthy. Obviously, we're in an economic downturn. But there's nothing wrong with America. It's just I think we've lost that bridge between our governance and what's going on in people's lives, what they do to raise their kids and their dreams and their hard work and their striving and their struggles, which create the character that make their lives rich. There's nothing wrong with America. And you can see that if you visit your houses and meet with your residents as you do. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just we don't transfer our best values to the way we run government. We transfer our worst values to the way we run government.
Do you think that the way we run government keeps people who may want to enter government from actually going into that arena because of what they see about how government is operated today?
You know, it's a great question, and I had an amazing question asked to me late in my campaign. You know, we've been through this saga of the scandal of politicians, you know, the Twitter stuff and the paternity suits and just all of the, you know, the womanizing and you say to yourself, does politics do this to people, or is there something about politics that attracts the wrong kind of people? I think it's a combination of the two. I mean, I think that the system, it's not a good stage for magnifying the best qualities that people have the way we run it today. Because when you go in with an imperative of getting reelected, you're immediately cutting deals and looking over the horizon and taking the shortcuts and not having courage and independence. So on that side, I think the system corrupts. And then, to your point, people see what it's like to get to the end point. They say, is this even worth it? And I do think good people stay out. I had the good fortune of being able to put some of my own life's good fortune into investing in my own campaign, which by definition gave me total independence, right, which is what I wanted. Now, in some quarters, I was criticized for that, you know. He's spending his own money. Well, I'm not spending anyone else's money. Shouldn't you want those people who can crash the gates? And I had to win a primary, a competitive and ugly primary in my own party, and I was criticized by many people in that process because I had done crazy things like give money to Democratic candidates at some point in my life. You know, I don't follow the rigorous check the box, you have to believe all these issues. I have a very strange collection of beliefs which are based on my own personal experience. They tend to be more Republican in the sense that I believe in individual initiative, and I believe that government should be as small as it can while still accomplishing, you know, its critical societal goals. You know, I'm definitely a Republican, but I don't heed to any creed, and I don't have a, you know, an R tattooed on my rump or anything like that. So I was criticized for that. And a lot of candidates who can't provide any funding and don't have the backing of the party machinery, they can't get through there.
It's next to impossible, absolutely.
And you've seen this yourself in expressing some courageous, independent views about candidates that you think would be better than others, and yet because you violated that stepping outside of the column concept, you're being pilloried in your own party.
It's been an interesting experience, but I happen to share your values and your views that you. Just because I'm an elected official doesn't take away my right as a citizen, actually my duty as a citizen, to speak my mind as to who's the best person who could represent our district.
And the most important thing to you should not be getting reelected, and it's not. So if you didn't get reelected, your life would go on.
I love the movie American President.
As do I.
There's so many great lines in that movie, and there's one line near the end of the movie where Michael Douglas's character, the president, says he was so worried about keeping his job that he forgot to do his job. And I think that's actually true about, unfortunately, too many of our elected officials in this country.
They cling to power.
Do you think that the terms, let's say, in Congress should be not just a 2-year term for House of Representatives, it should be a longer term?
One of my crazy ideas, which didn't get a lot of airtime, was 4-year terms for congressmen, and you would elect half of the Congress every 2 years. So that would give you enough of a timetable that you could actually try to express courage and independence, and you would only have 2 of those terms. So your maximum term, you could be reelected once as a congressman, 8 years. So imagine somebody who goes into Congress and says, I already have half of my expected tenure.
Right.
If I don't get reelected, it's fine. I'm out anyway. But now imagine somebody who gets elected once for a 2-year term, and he's planning to be there for 20 or 30 or 50 years. In fact, there's one seat in the state of Michigan that's been in the same family since the Great Depression. Okay?
Well, that's depressing.
And that's depressing.
It is.
But the point is, you know, if you're only into 10% or 5% of your expected life, you're going to take any risks? Are you going to offend the guy who could give you that next seat on the next subcommittee or the chairmanship of, you know, something that's going to give you posture and position to go out to the lobbyists and collect more money to get reelected? It's a polluted and ugly process. And I thought it was broken when I ran for Congress. And having gone through the experience, it's even worse than I thought. So again, I'll come back to how I started. We don't need incremental change. We need dramatic change. And this is where the Tea Party and this is where the Occupy Wall Street, you know, that anger, I think that the system is broken, is very well founded. We might disagree on what the right solutions are or even what caused the break, but the system is broken. Politics are broken in America.
Do you find what I will call like the length of period? We have a presidential election and it's a year away, and quite frankly, that election process started in advance of the recent election. I mean, is that too long of a time period?
It's too long. It's too much campaigning and not enough governing. I mean, in a state like New Jersey, where we have these off-cycle elections, I mean, there's basically an election every single year. It's like New Jersey is always in political mode. And maybe that's one of the reasons why there's not as much long-term planning and process improvement as there needs to be.
Right. I know, like even along those lines here in East Brunswick, we have elections every 2 years, so we have an off-year election. I'm not saying, and I don't want our residents to misunderstand what I'm saying, that impacts what we do from a governmental standpoint. But in talking to friends who have communities where there is election at the local level every year, it interferes with doing government. So it's good to have like those off years.
Right. So I mean, I believe in longer terms and fewer elections and more planning, more strategy, more long-term thinking. I mean, the country has gotten incredibly short-term, and then because the explosion of modern media, it's sort of show business, and so people. One of the issues with society is people don't concentrate anymore. You know, it's all quick stimulation and short impact stuff, and you know, that's why I love walking through the library, just watching people reading and kids doing their homework, and it's so quiet out there. Right. You see very little of that in society anymore.
Well, with the technology, like you have your iPhone, your iPad, your other tablets, there is no moment that you cannot be, you know, doing things as opposed to, as you say, just picking up a book, reading, or even just sitting quietly and meditating and thinking about what's going on around you. It just comes at you so fast-paced life.
I mean, we're so connected and we have so much information, but we have very little judgment. And you only get judgment from either experience or contemplation, I think. And those are two attributes that are pretty scarce, certainly in the way we govern and maybe in society at large.
Post-election, you've helped form the Lincoln Club. For the residents who don't know what that is, why don't you tell us about it?
Well, what happened after my election, I immediately went back to my life, and as I said, I was happy to do it. My wife sat on our bed for about 2 weeks and cried because she had been so reluctant to get in, but then became so close to so many supporters and so close to the process that when it was over, it was like the last day of school and the corridors were empty, and it was, where is everybody? I was happy to go back to my business life, but a lot of my supporters were not happy to have me go back to my old life. They said, we got to keep marching. And so we struck a compromise. I want to stay engaged in the public discussion about government. I'm not sure I ever want to run again, but we created a club, which is really, I think I got 93,000 votes in 5 counties and 44 towns. I had a lot of people that believed in my message, and I didn't want to just go away. So we created a club which is really not just about elections and politics. It's more about the front end of good government, which is education and engagement, and then elections. So we have minimal dues. We collect some money. We have breakfast speakers, not on necessarily political topics. Last week, we had a documentary filmmaker who had made a movie called Fear of a Black Republican, and it was a fascinating historical study brought up to date on racial identity politics and why there aren't more black Republicans and why that lack of competition is bad for the inner city, which is by definition, by extension, bad for America. We had David Goldman, who talked about his horrific child abduction case where he lost his child to his ex-wife, took the kid to Brazil, and how he had to work through the system to fix that. We had the state treasurer of New Jersey to just do, a teach-in on here's our budget, here's how much we spend, and here's why we have the issues we do. So I think if we empower people with information, they will end up becoming more fair-minded and make better choices, and that will help improve the process. We also support some candidates. So last election, we picked 3 challengers. I don't support, through this organization, incumbents. I do fund incumbents separately with my own money, but with this organization, we fund challengers, people, first-time candidates who need help. Who want to buck maybe the party system and just need some experience and some advice and some money. And so we supported 3 out of the 120 challengers. Of course, all the incumbents in New Jersey were reelected. So we weren't successful, but I think we made a small dent, and we're going to keep going. Well,
I think just the fact that, as you said, that you're help educating and informing, the public, I think that over time turns into a better electorate which then I would at least hope turns into a better government.
I think so, and we need to repair frankly, the apathy, the lack of information. We had 26% voter turnout in our legislative races in New Jersey. Terrible. The presidential elections will get into the 60s, but for my election, we were maybe back down to 40%, the congressional elections.
One last question on politics, and then we're going to switch gears and talk about your business side. Do you think, or what could possibly change in the system where it seems the incumbents have such a great advantage over the challengers? I mean, here in the state of New Jersey, where we have people upset with the status quo, we've got a lot of reforms that are going on, highly debated, yet pretty much person for person was reelected. Right. I don't even understand the disconnect, quite frankly.
People are, by and large, very dissatisfied with government, but they reelect the same people that constitute that government. And I don't think we can fix problems by reelecting problems. So something is going to break. I would throw out 2 suggestions. Number 1, we're running out of money, and that's going to break a lot of traditional habits. As you know, sitting in your seat, it's hard to govern now because you have to make tough choices of yes and no. For the 20 preceding years, it was very easy to govern because government revenues went up, real estate values went up, tax receipts went up, and all you had to do was spend money. It was easy to govern. Yeah. Now it's hard to govern because we're down the backside of that mountain. So something's going to break. And you're seeing it in the public resentment. You're seeing it in the protests, the unemployment rates. Something is going to break, and how that's going to happen, I don't know. The other thing that might happen is you might have a credible third-party movement develop, and maybe it'll develop on the local level, where people just say, I'm going to try the new solution. A pox on both your houses, you're both corrupt. That could happen, and it could happen even on the presidential level, where a credible third-party candidate comes out and people say, I'm going to try the new path. And once you do that, you might break the log jam and force America back to, what needs to be done, as opposed to the empty air of rhetoric and posturing and the TV sound bites. If you could get a solid core of both Republicans and Democrats and some third-party effort to actually start reforming the system, reforming the tax code, breaking the power of special interests, getting all these goodies out of the tax code, which is something I campaigned a lot against, which is really a form of special interest lobbying, impacting the way we spend money in this country. Things like term limits, constitutionally balanced budgets, to reinstill some real fiscal discipline into the way we run the country.
It is a challenging time with with trying to govern with the limited resources that you continue to have. But it's also, I find it, that's quite frankly
that's the challenge.
The challenge and the excitement of the job is to make the puzzle work at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Anyone can, as you said, during great times, it's much easier to govern or run anything when you've got ample resources.
Right. And I think the same thing, just to segue, since you wanted to, into the business side. I'm a huge believer that challenging economic times are actually a great time to innovate, because every company, every consumer, every household is being forced, because of the austerity, because of shrinking resources, to reevaluate their priorities, how they spend money. And actually, the history of innovation in America is many of the great American companies were founded in very difficult economic times. Walt Disney during the Great Depression, Apple and Microsoft during the stagflation, stagnant 1970s. And there's a reason for that. It's because when things are tough, people change their behavior. The economic landscape gets a real hard shake, and some new pieces end up on top. And so what I'm doing in my business life, which I've been doing, and I'm doing it more formally than I had been over the last few years, is I'm creating ventures to invest in innovation. I'm a huge believer that there is a new economy rising. As bleak as things are, and I understand they are bleak out there, there is a new economy that's developing. You see it in the penetration of online shopping. You see it in, for example, here's a quiz question. Do you know what the most frequently used word now is? It's the letter R, because of the growth of cell phone technologies and texting, that the letter R, at least that's what Google said, is the most frequently written word. Simple way of saying the explosion of mass technologies. We talked about digital technologies. It affects the way people live. We're living more of our lives online. Online shopping up 25% in the Black Friday period. At the same time, retail sales are sort of stagnant. So you just see the world is changing. Small semiconductor technologies allow the proliferation of technology just about everywhere, in your car, in your PDA, in your home, your TV, and your computer. There's new jobs, there's new challenges. And I think that this is actually a very exciting time for a place like America, where we teach our kids critical thinking skills. We're a country of risk takers. The whole culture of America was based on risk taking, and we should win in this new economic climate if we pursue the policies that encourage people to take those sorts of risks.
And you formed Westland Ventures? So
Westland Ventures is my investing company. I've started 2 new businesses, actually. Very excited about both of them. One of them is called Innovation Garden, and it's located just down Route 1 in Princeton in the Forestall Village. And it's literally a laboratory space for incubating and nurturing and growing small companies. They have shared technology. We give them a toolkit, so they have their back office and their computer and their phone and their accounting all taken care of. And then we're going to incubate these companies and start them with 1 or 2 or 3 seats and try to get them to the point where they can be birthed into the outside world and get real venture capital funding. There's kind of a capital void in America for startups. A lot of it is friends and family, maybe an angel investor into. If you can get from that point to the point where a venture capital firm will give you $5 or $10 million, you're on your way. But the birthing process in here is very difficult, so that's our focus. Is
that made more challenging, given the fact that our banking structure is still in difficulties, and banks, quite frankly, are very restricted in what they're lending today?
But banks don't lend to these types of companies anyway. Banks really need asset security, so they'll lend against a house, or they'll lend against inventory, or they'll lend against accounts receivable, but they won't lend to a startup guy with a good business plan and 2 or 3 clients. That's what we try to do, is to find a business model that can be scaled with an entrepreneur who's fully invested in the success of the business, give them capital, give them mentoring, give them referrals, help them to grow their business, and then hopefully we can graduate companies out of the garden and then recycle it and grow the garden.
So within your garden, if we use the phrase, we've got many different type of vegetables growing?
Many vegetables. We're launching the business right now. We're actually putting a fund together. We have our space, and we're going to grow anything that'll grow in the garden, and hopefully we'll have a bountiful crop. The other business I started is an online magazine. an alternative newspaper, I call it, based in the Princeton area. It's called Genius Country. You can find it at geniuscountry.com. And it's emotionally appealing, very vivid, very clever story writing. We do a feature a day based on companies or businesses or organizations in the Princeton area. And it's sort of a way of unmasking the hidden genius in that community. And this is an idea which could probably be ported to many communities, including maybe your own. But we're starting it in the Princeton area, and that business just launched within the last month.
It'll be exciting. I'll go on and check it as we
it out.
leave. Your experiences on Wall Street and in your investing led you to write a book.
Yes.
What was the title of that book, and what led you even to give that a thought?
The book was called The Golden Dog, and I guess I can confess it's a semi-autobiographical tale of a small country kid who gets a job on Wall Street just as the business is booming. And he has his eyes open to the majesty and the mystery and the money and the intrigue of Wall Street. And it sort of follows his narrative into a employment with a very interesting megalomaniac who is the most brilliant money man on Wall Street, and the moral challenges of being successful in that kind of environment. The reason I wrote the book is I had an incredible experience on Wall Street, and I sort of see Wall Street as it's a stage that magnifies every quality that exists there. So if you're a comedian, you have an even bigger stage. If you're brilliant, you have an even bigger stage. If you're a crook, you have even easier tools to ply your trade. And I had a great career, lasted about 20 years on Wall Street. I got out in 2007. I closed my business at the top of the market. I gave all my investors their money back at the high water mark. I walked away and said, I'm clean. And literally within months, the world was exploding. And stock prices were crashing, companies were failing, and bodies were starting to float to the surface. And the Bernie Madoff scandal and all these scoundrels come out, and people are saying, what is it about Wall Street? What is it about this place that leads to these sort of recurring cycles of boom and bust and this bad behavior? And so I started kind of pulling fragments together of my own career and things that I've seen and people that I've watched and behavior that I'd seen. I said, this is actually a really good story. So I just started writing one day. And as I started writing, sort of the words just started coming out of me, and I started remembering stories, and I said, this is a good tale. And then, so it ended up being faction in the sense that I changed the names to protect the innocent, but there are certainly characters in the book that are modeled on people I knew, and it sort of navigates this path of somebody who was trying to do right, and he was just caught in a jungle where it wasn't always black and white, it was somewhere in between, and how do you navigate the gray areas of life?
I think that, getting back to how we started this conversation dealing with government, I think it's the same.
Are you suggesting I should write a novel about politics?
I think it's what you're just talking about, a lot of the characteristics that are involved, right. It's the same thing in government, where people start off and then they're on a bigger stage and somehow life overtakes them.
I think the analogies are actually very close. And maybe I'm attracted to that kind of stage because I like the personal challenge of having to navigate these moral challenges. But certainly people change when they become successful on Wall Street, and people change when they become successful in politics. Or there are certainly forces that tug at them that make them emotionally and ethically conflicted, I think, at times. And it's not always clear what's the right track and what's the wrong track.
This has been the shortest half hour, I would tell you.
We're done? I'm just getting going here.
Well, we'll have you back. I
Okay.
mean, this has been an unbelievable conversation, Scott, and I want to appreciate you for sharing your views with the residents of East Brunswick. So I appreciate you at home taking the time to listen to my conversation with Scott Sipprelle. I want to extend everyone the best for the new year. And again, thanks for watching.